It is my pleasure to introduce you to Ivan Gonzalez. Ivan is a nationally recognized and gifted social entrepreneur and trainer, committed for more than 25 years to equipping leaders to make a difference in their community. And he has worked with startups, he's worked with mid-size enterprises successfully to develop what might be called new economy, socially impactful businesses that focus on multiple bottom lines. Ivan was with World Vision for 12 years and in charge of the entire central United States. So he has worked on these questions from multiple angles. He is still starting businesses. He has worked for the Christian Community Development Association as well. He's worked with something called the Stewards Market, which catalyzes social enterprise. And I'd have to say, I've been doing this for 25 or more years in the city. Of all the speakers I have ever invited to our city, Ivan has done more advanced research for months on Fresno. He's talked to people in Fresno I haven't talked to. He just called them up and said, tell me what's going on. I have never met someone so invested in learning about the city that he's getting ready to serve. And so it is just a huge pleasure and privilege for me to introduce Ivan Gonzalez to you. Ivan, come.
Can you hear me? All right. I'm excited to be here. I'm nervous and excited at the same time because I know that this is an ongoing journey for most of you. Some of you are starting this journey around this phrase, social enterprise. How many of you have heard, for those of you who are first-time attenders, how many of you have heard the phrase social enterprise before? Raise your hand. All right. How many of you haven't, you first-time attenders, you haven't heard the word social enterprise? Okay. Good percentage. Great. I was pleasantly surprised. I drove down yesterday and I stopped in I made an appointment with Jake Soberall over at Bitwise Industries, and I thought, I need to go see this guy. This guy seems to be tracking with an entrepreneurial opportunity that's going to be transformative for the city of Fresno, number one. Number two, I think that how he talks about what he's doing is a fascinating model. I thought he was launching startups. And I came in with that lens when I sat with him yesterday and talked with him briefly for about 15 minutes. And then I realized that this guy is essentially, and his partners are essentially, what they're doing is they're identifying a sector of society that normally hasn't connected with each other. They've been working in isolation from each other, and he invited them to form a community and start doing the same kind of work together in the same place. So I was really excited to see him and to visit him before I came here. Again, my name is Ivan Gonzalez. I am Puerto Rican by descent, a little island of Puerto Rico off the coast of Florida. My parents migrated from Puerto Rico in 1958 to California, Northern California, and I was born the following year in 1959 in Napa. So I grew up for the first 15 years of my life in the Napa Valley, and my folks were the first ones from both sides of their families to migrate to California from Puerto Rico. And they were the reason why all the rest of my relatives ended up in Northern California. So I've got 100 cousins and uncles and aunts all up and down the Napa Valley. And lived in San Fernando Valley, lived in Santa Monica for a while. So I love California. I wish I could be back here again, but life has other circumstances for me, and so we've settled our homes and our lives in Chicago. And so I'm excited to be here and be back home again for this time. This morning, what I would like to do is I would like to suggest a number of things. I came with a number of assumptions. Number one, I came with an assumption that you have an interest, you're curious about this idea of social enterprise and business as an agent of transformation. Some of you from the church side are thinking, I don't know if this is a legitimate expression of the church. And then some of you from the business side are saying, church people operate too slow, and they don't look at the bottom line, and they don't talk about cash flow, and they don't talk about profit loss, and they don't talk about market advantage and competitive advantage, and they don't talk about their marketing strategy. I don't know what I'm doing at this conference. I want to say that it's okay. You can exhale, and you can begin to get to know people who are different than you. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to go introduce yourself to 4 people that you don't know, and just tell them why you're here this morning so that I can introduce you to each other. I'm only going to be here for today and tomorrow, and then I'm going to go back to Chicago. So I want to create value for you. I want you to be able to connect with people that you wouldn't have connected with before. So go meet 4 people, say hi real quick. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do that, and I'm going to call you back, okay? All you introverts, get out of your chairs.
All right, folks. I'd ask you to come back to your tables and
Okay, let's come back together, please. Return to your tables, please. Okay, folks, we need you to sit down now. Can return to your table, please. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Ivan, take us away.
this morning I'm going to cover 4 different subjects, and I've got about 40 minutes to do that, so I wanted to roughly run through the agenda with you. The first thing that I'm going to cover this morning is kingdom entrepreneurship as a concept. My next thing will be kingdom companies, defining what it means to be a kingdom company, and give you a few examples of what those kingdom companies are that I'm connected to or that I know about that will spark imagination and hope for you as you consider this possibility. And then I'm going to look at social business as a strategy. It's going to be interesting. I've got a couple of YouTubes connected here that will give you an outside perspective on what is social business from one of the premier launchers of social businesses in the world, and a little bit of a contrasting model that I'll share with you. So let me get, and then we'll have a Q&A time towards the end. So I just wanted to thank Randy and Jeanette and the rest of the team from FPU and the Center for Community Transformation for inviting me to this conference. I'm really excited about what's going to happen today, and hopefully I can be of service to you, and this will be a helpful process. Again, my name's Ivan Gonzalez, and you've introduced yourselves to each other. And so let me start with some assumptions. As I said, in the room, there's everyone from first-time attendees to a conference around business as a church person, and then all the way through to business people who are doing business in their sleep. They're thinking of models, they're launching new businesses, they've figured out how to get the funding for it, they've figured out how to do the business plan for it, they're experienced in this area. And what I hope will happen today is that there will be a cross-pollination of ideas from church folks to business folks, understanding that we're both needed for the work that this city needs to be transformed. And then I'm a person of faith. I try to follow Jesus as closely as I know how. I make a lot of mistakes. I say a lot of stupid things sometimes. I say some really great things sometimes. I try to be humble about my journey, and I believe that as a person of faith and following Jesus, I believe that Jesus is involved in entrepreneurship. I think the church is an entrepreneurial opportunity that he launched. He was the founder, and he launched it, and he launched the kingdom that's associated with the church. So I'm going to bring that lens into my conversation as it relates to social entrepreneurship. And then I also believe that Jesus has a role in all of the activity and all of the things that we're doing together. I believe that he's a king. I believe that he has a kingdom. I believe that there are governing principles to that kingdom. I believe that those governing principles dictate what happens and what doesn't happen that is sustainable or not sustainable. And so I try to live my life and do all my entrepreneurial activity around those lenses. And I also believe there's opposition to the kingdom expression of social entrepreneurship. Any business, it doesn't have to be social, any business that's formed, that's out there to solve a problem, that's out there to relieve a pain point in humanity, is a social business from my perspective. It doesn't have to be labeled a social business. Any business is trying to solve a problem. The church is a business trying to solve a problem, a significant problem. if I might add. And businesses are trying to solve a problem too. So we're in this together. What I'm trying to say is that the usual conversation I get into with folks, whether from the business side or from the ministry side, is there's always this conflict. There's conflict between how fast you want to do things as a business person, and then in the ministry side, we got to take our time. We got to be very prayerful. We have to consider a lot of things. And there's always this tension in terms of pacing, funding, opportunity costs. And so I want to encourage us to really cross the line, go over and meet business folks, church people, and church people, business folks meet church people. And let's do this together. Let's learn from each other. It's time for this city to do this together. The problems are too big and too complex and too hard to solve by one entity alone. Can I say that again? It's really hard to solve employment problems or employment opportunities all by yourself. You can launch a workforce development program and have 25 people in your program and do that for 1 year, and you've made a dent. But what if you could launch a program that meets 1,000 people's needs because you're collaborating with a few other organizations and churches and business people and the city, and you collaborate and you meet 1,000 people's needs in that 1 year? Isn't that a better model? Doesn't it make more sense? Isn't that better stewardship of the skill sets and the money and the facilities that we all have as part of our stewardship? It is, right? So that's what I'm advocating for. And that's uncomfortable, you know? It's very uncomfortable. I remember when I grew up, my mom and dad are church planters. And we planted churches in Northern California, in southwestern Michigan, and in Indiana. And I remember as a 5-year-old kid going into a new neighborhood for the first time and beginning to figure out, like, where are we going to find people, to start talking about, church stuff. And we would go to the coffee shops, and we would go to the thrift stores, and we would go to, different places to start building relationship. And mom and dad are both nurses. They're registered nurses, so they had first aid training, and they had these skills that they were able to use to help families that were poor to really have significant impact on their lives, teach them first aid skills. And so I understood how to market. I learned marketing from that process. And I learned how to listen to my customer from that process. And I learned how to be creative in terms of resources and supplies. And so it gave me a sense of, a different sense of what it means to be an entrepreneur. And I didn't realize until about 5 years ago when I started thinking about my journey. I'm 54 years old, and I remember thinking, man, I must have been an entrepreneur all my life, because we've always been launching things. We've launched so many churches. And then I moved to Chicago in 1985, and I helped launch a nonprofit organization called SOY, Second Generation Organization for Youth. And it was a social enterprise. It essentially got kids that were involved in gangs in Humboldt Park and got them back into school, helped them find their passion around with internships, with mentors that were in the community. So whether it was a government person or an airline pilot at O'Hare Airport, or an attorney downtown, or a business owner, or any kind of professional that they had, whose career they had an interest in, we basically connected with them with those professionals. So I learned early on the importance of building relationships across sectors that I had no exposure to. So as I said, I'm a church kid. I grew up that way. And about 15 years ago, I got exposed to this idea of social entrepreneurship. I didn't really understand what it was. As Randy mentioned, I worked for World Vision, and I basically helped start a rebuilding materials warehouse distribution center. It started out with 18,000 square feet, and the neighborhood where we were in was an impoverished neighborhood, and they basically said, Ivan, can you help us figure out whether there's a need for building materials in this neighborhood? And so when we went around and surveyed, we did research, market research, and we surveyed all the folks that were there and all the organizations, and they basically said, if you could provide access to building materials that would help us renovate our buildings, then we would be happy. And so we tested the market. We went out to all the manufacturers, distributors, and retailers across the country, and we asked them, what are you doing with your excess inventory? You know how they plan their inventory runs, right? They basically determine, like, how many units, Kohler would say, how many tubs do we need to make in this color and this design for this year? And they say 100,000 units. And at the end of the year, if they have 20,000 units left over because they only sold 80,000, they have to do something with them because they have their new product lines that are coming up for the next year. And so we found out that they were essentially trying to liquidate those things as quickly as they could. And we said, well, we'll take care of them. And we were able to glean product from Kohler, from American Standard, from Price Pfister, from Moen, from Delta, and start this warehouse where we were able to distribute those products to nonprofits throughout the city. A lot of them were churches, a lot of them were nonprofit organizations. At a cost, we were charging a handling fee to help them access those products. And so we launched the first one in Chicago, and then we launched 9 more across the country, in Los Angeles, in Dallas, in New York, and they're still up and running. And so I learned a model of business that was still from the kind of the nonprofit side, but we found ourselves getting into conversations with Fortune 500 company owners who were saying, this helps me solve a business problem. The only way I had to deal with this was either to send it to landfill or to send it to another country. I'm incurring a lot of shipping costs. Can you help me save money? I'm going to say that again. Can you help me save money? As the church, this conversation about social enterprise is twofold. One is, how can you help the market save money? Number one. Number two, how do we have a business that impacts people in a positive way? Those who are hard to employ or have little employment skills, how do we get them the skills that they need in order to be able to find a viable job and help them provide for their families? My understanding in Fresno is that there's this huge gap between the workforce and the ability of the workforce and the kinds of jobs that are open right now. I understand there's a lot of high-skilled jobs that are available. And I understand that the skills of the current workforce aren't high enough to meet that demand. So what if we collaborated and said, let's help get these individuals the skills that they need in order to be able to fill the jobs that are open in Fresno? That would be a social enterprise that would be amazing, and that would be a blessing to the city, right, if we could figure that out. And some of you are beginning to do that. Some of you are beginning to work on those things. So my preparation, Randy mentioned that I had really done a lot of research, and I spent 3 months doing research on Fresno. And so I looked at all the faith community. I looked at all the Catholic, the archdiocese here in Fresno, and checked in on all the churches. And I looked at the West Fresno Ministerial Alliance. I looked at the No Name Fellowship. I looked at the People's Church. I looked at what Carricker was doing in Fresno. I looked at the Street Saints and what Brian's doing, a Chicagoan, by the way. I looked at Fresno Ministries and all the work that Keith is doing. You've got some amazing, talented people in this city that have a great lens to how the city operates and how they make decisions, policy decisions. Can I emphasize something here? I think it's really, really important as followers of Christ to know how the city functions. I think it's really important to understand how policy gets implemented, how laws get formed. Because when the roads aren't being fixed and you hit that pothole with your car, when the light's out on the corner or there are no lights and there's more accidents on that corner than any other corner in the city, when you don't have access to quality food or healthy food and you have to drive 4 or 5 miles to access quality food, it's really important to understand why that situation is the way it is. And it makes a difference when we as Christ followers are involved and we're listening and contributing to the decision-making process in the city of Fresno. I take the risk right now by mentioning the Fresno General Plan 2035. I know that there's been a lot of conversations around the general plan for Fresno. And I know there's been a lot of opportunity for people to give their input to the plan. I'm just going to ask, you don't have to raise your hand, how many of you have been involved in those conversations, making your suggestions about whether it's housing or infrastructure or land use or economic opportunity or there's a number of entrepreneurial opportunities in those conversations. And I think Jesus would want us to represent his kingdom, his values, his purposes for mankind by being present in those conversations and by giving your perspective and by sharing your ideas with city leaders. It's an important function as the body of Christ. So, and then I looked at what Habitat for Humanity was doing. I looked at World Impact. I looked at Every Neighborhood, Artie, and all the work that he's doing with 61 schools, connecting churches to those 61 schools. I think Artie, are you here? Yeah. How many schools are left?
Well, there's 51 schools with about 65 churches.
Okay.
So we've still got about 20 more schools.
20 more schools to connect with. So talk to Artie if you're a church, and yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing work. I looked at what the Youth for Christ was doing, Faith in Communities, and all the work of PICO, the Well Community Church. I looked at Westside Church of God and all the work that Pastor Binion's doing and representing. And then I looked at business in the San Joaquin Valley, and I was intrigued by the Ag Expo. How many of you, anybody here attend the Ag Expo? Was it fun? Kinda. I don't hear any raving reviews. I got excited. I saw most of the stuff online on YouTube, and I thought, man, if there's ever a place to be entrepreneurial and to see what technology can do to help farmers really reduce their costs and help support their family businesses and deal with the issues of water in the San Joaquin Valley, that's a place where the church needs to be, to see all the latest inventions. I even went so far as to see all the award winners and deep root irrigation, right? Conservation of water. And they figured out a way to design an irrigation system that drives the tube way down to the bottom of the roots of anything that they're growing so that they don't waste any water, surface water. And I thought, man, I wish I would have been here. I would have figured out how to invent something like that. And there's already like 6 or 7 competing companies that are providing farmers a great solution to their water shortage issues. And then I saw a solar-powered water pump. Anybody know about solar-powered water pumps? I mean, who would have thunk? You know? And there were so many. I looked at that and I thought, there's so many entrepreneurial opportunities at the Ag Expo. So I go to those things. I go to the trade shows at McCormick Place. I go to the trade shows in Las Vegas. I go to the trade shows wherever I can get into a trade show. If I'm in a city in a layover, I go to those trade shows because there's a lot of economic opportunity and there's a lot of entrepreneurial opportunity in those environments. And as I mentioned, I went to Bitwise and I did a lot of research on Bitwise because as far as I know, it's the only technology-focused entrepreneurial activity that's going on here in the city. And they want to beat Silicon Valley, so it was intriguing to me. And then what Wawona Frozen Foods is doing and the Smith camps, I was really excited to see such visibility from their company and the fact that they're Christ followers and they're really trying to do some good things in this community. And I celebrate that, I really do. And then what Craig's doing at Peeves Public House, I was excited. I really want to go there. I really want to experience Peeves. Thank you for being entrepreneurial in that environment, Craig, and for launching this in the Fulton Mall. It's really a testament to someone who's got a vision to see something that's kind of desolate be transformed and become productive again. So hats off to you, Craig. And then the CBMC and all the work that they're doing with all the Christian business owners and the CBWC, all the work that they're doing. And I really want to encourage the CBMC and the CBWC to get engaged in this conversation more and to be part of this ecosystem that's beginning to develop, the hard work of Randy over the last 3 years. There's a lot of wonderful contributions and a lot of wonderful opportunities that the members of CBMC can provide and can be exposed to. And I think there's going to be a mutual benefit for the cross-pollination of those two groups. So I encourage that. I look at Cargill and all the work that they're doing, broadcasting, I believe Fresno campaign. Then I looked at city government and all the work that the mayor's doing, along with all the city council members. Randy was surprised that I knew pretty much all the where we drove around last night, all around the city. I said, this must be Councilman Baines' district. How did you know that? Or Olivier's or Soria, he was mentioning, yeah, there's a new council person that got elected about 3. Oh, you mean Esmeralda, right? He looked at me and he said, how do you know that? So I'm sharing all this with you because my entrepreneurial mind, every place I go, I do a lot of research because I really want to understand the context that I'm landing in. And I want to, there's 2 purposes. One is to hear God speak about what he's doing in that city, number 1. Number 2, figure out who he wants me to go and connect with. And I'm the kind of person that'll cold call someone. I was watching, I'll show you a little bit later. I won't mention that right now, but I'm just the kind of person. If I see an interesting person in a city, I'll call them and I say, can I come and meet with you? And I'll tell them why I want to meet with them. And I just want you to give me 15 minutes. And I go and I usually make a good connection and they refer me to the next person that I need to talk to. And that's just how my mind works. And again, I've got the list of all the council persons on here, and I've looked at all the work that they're doing, and then I looked at all the downtown Fresno partnership stuff, strong cities, strong communities initiatives. Looked at the city of Clovis. Looked at the fact that the 2 city councils are meeting together and trying to figure out how do we work together to solve problems that are more broader than each of our cities. And then the county government, state government. I looked at I've been reading the Fresno Bee and the Business Journal every day for the last 3 months. Sorry? You would be surprised how many entrepreneurial opportunities I remember, what was it, a couple months ago, there was a young woman, 8-year-old young African-American woman who won Entrepreneur of the Year award, right? And where?
Her name is Danae Ferguson.
Danae Ferguson, yeah. And I was like, wow, how cool is that the city is celebrating this young entrepreneur's activity. And of course, she's got the support of her mom and dad and the rest of the ecosystem to help her be successful in this initiative. So entrepreneurship can be done by anyone. It's a matter of having the support and the ecosystem around them to really take these things to the next level. And then I looked at television, all your television stations. I found your online radio stations and listened to them, all the arts and entertainment, the Art Hop, the Cart Hop, the Catacomb Party, all the school districts. I'll just fast forward here. And then families. Do you guys know about the Institute for Family Business at Fresno State? Anybody? Raise your hands if you know. A few. So this is an institute that basically helps family businesses really get on their feet and stay on their feet and learn how to market their business, learn how to grow their business. They share their experiences with each other about how tough it is to run a family business. What are the political issues they need to be aware of as it relates to expanding their business? What are the business opportunities? Where's their cash for additional, if you want to expand your business? I mean, it's a great resource you have in your valley to understand how family business works. And I would encourage you to go onto campus and go visit the Institute for Family Business. You'll be able to listen and you'll be able to see more entrepreneurial opportunity in that community. How am I doing on time?
You have 15 minutes.
Okay. And then why I'm here, I'm really passionate about the expression of business as a kingdom initiative from God. The thing that I've been struggling with lately is this question. How much of capitalism is represented in the kingdom of God? What parts of capitalism are kingdom parts, and what parts of it are more kind of man's ideas about how to grow business and launch businesses? And I've been struggling with this question for probably the last 15 years. And I have a lot of reasons behind that. But I want you to know that that's still part of it. I stand here today with that question in my mind. And the reason I stand here today with that question in my mind is because of what it says in Acts chapter 2, Acts chapter 4, and Acts chapter 6. Basically, it says that all the believers were together and there was no one in need amongst them. From time to time, people would sell their excess stuff and they would bring it, and it would provide for the needs of those who needed. And there was a discernment process within the body of Christ to provide for those needs. It wasn't freeloading. It was really legitimate needs that were provided for in the community of Christ. And so when I look at that model and I layer on top of that capitalism, I wonder what parts of it represent the kingdom and what parts of it don't. Kind of mess with the idea of community amongst us. Randy and I were talking last night, and we were talking about how as Americans, we have learned to be individualistic, right? We've learned to provide for ourselves, not to have to rely on anybody for anything. And we're proud. We're proud about the fact that we have provided for our kids and nobody has helped us to provide for our kids or for our families. And when I think about the challenge of the American lifestyle, the American way of doing life, and I look at what Scripture says about how we're supposed to live with each other and be interdependent with each other, I'm perplexed, you know? And I'm worried for us as Americans. I really am. I'm worried that the deep-rooted value of love for one another cannot be fully expressed because we are still very independent from each other. And we pride ourselves on being successful. We pride ourselves on launching successful businesses and on being, climbing the corporate ladder and being successful and having all the toys. And I mean, we wouldn't say that out loud, but it's part of our self-reliance, that worries me. And so my hope is that as I go on my journey, as I get older, and as I press into God, that I'll find places, expressions of the kingdom that have strong business models, that are doing amazing, that are having highly impactful business operations across the globe, but they're also being formed with a sense of community amongst all the employees, amongst the communities where they live, and that people will look at that business and they'll say, there is something completely different going on in that community. And I'm intrigued, not just by the business model, but I'm intrigued by how they treat each other and how they love each other and how they care for each other. And they make really great products. They're amazing products. One company like that is the Bruderhof community. How many of you know of the Bruderhof community in New York? They've got 3 businesses. They make children's furniture out of wood. It's some of the best stuff out there. And it's all done by their community. And they all work together, and they all help support each other in that community. And then they have 2 other businesses that they've launched. And I look at that model as a flicker of hope as it relates to how capitalism and how community can intersect with each other. It's still challenging because they pretty much the community is kind of it's all Bruderhofish kind of community. If you align yourself with those values, then you're part of that community. If you don't, then you're not. And they're trying to expand. They're trying to break out of that mold. But that's the hopeful model. I see children and those that are most marginalized as part of the reason why I do what I do. To me, the Bible speaks of justice for the widow, the orphan, the stranger. And I believe that, I don't know who it was, someone picked out like 1,000 verses out of the Bible, and it said that without justice, the Bible is incomplete, And it's important for us as Christ followers to understand that He came for the most marginalized people in society. And sometimes that marginalization is that corporate CEO who is going hard after his goals and being very successful. And God wants that person's heart just as much as He wants that poor person's heart. And then I came for you. I really want to add value to your journey. I really want to. I did all this research to understand what's going on here so that when I came, I could speak to some of the things that I felt like God put on my heart. Deepening relationships, challenging ourselves to pursue the heart of Jesus. So I have this video. How many of you have seen this, The Tale of Two Cities by Evan Onstadt and Dr. Matthew Gendian? A few of you? Okay, I'm going to show a little portion of this, and then we can talk about it. There we go. Forgive the advertisement at the beginning, but it's the only way I could get.
Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation is now hiring correctional peace officers. If you are at least 20 years old, have a high school diploma or GED, are a U.S. citizen, or have applied for U.S. citizenship and have no felony convictions, you are eligible to become a correctional peace officer. Get paid to attend our training academy and receive enhanced benefits and retirement. Military veterans may qualify for
It's coming.
benefits.
8 seconds.
7,000 correctional officers will be hired. One of them could be you. Apply online today at
It's a good advertisement, by the way.
join.com.
Come on, technology.
Tonight we're kicking off a three-part series examining the growing divide that exists between North and South Fresno.
There are haves and have-nots everywhere in this country. It's a fact of life. But the gap in Fresno is bigger than other places. Now, I spent the past few weeks studying this divide, but there are some who have studied it for decades. They say in this tale of two cities, where you live greatly predicts how your life unfolds.
Who has dishes tonight?
In a small two-bedroom apartment on the north edge of downtown Fresno, Brandy Blanco oversees what many might think impossible.
Go ahead and start reading them out to me.
Dinner and homework with their 5 children, all of them remarkably well-behaved.
Sound it out. Hard? Hard, yes.
Hard is one way to put it for this single mother. If there are two distinct sides of Fresno, Blanco knows exactly on which side she falls.
Other people, where do you live? Oh, how do you do it?
Blanco actually likes where she lives, the Lowell neighborhood, but says the difference between North and South Fresno is as simple for her as looking at grocery options.
A lot better shopping areas everywhere else. But on our streets, we have a liquor store in every single corner.
The Tale of Two Cities is a story of a division within our community, mostly along the lines of socioeconomic demographics.
Dr. Matthew Jindian is a sociology professor at Fresno State. He's not the first person to use the phrase "a tale of two cities" to describe Fresno, but he has been studying it here since 1995.
Different people living in different zip codes are effectively having different quality of life outcomes. Lack of economic opportunities, declining education, declining tax base as people are moving out to the fringes, those parts are becoming left behind.
Dr. Jindian gives a PowerPoint presentation on the subject where he shows the simple divide between Fresno's haves and have-nots. And almost without fail, each map looks the same, whether it's measuring ethnicity, education, or income.
Even their lifetime expectancy is different based on zip code.
A simple drive up and down Blackstone pretty much says all you need to know. There is no River Park South. But still, the question must be asked, if you live up here, why should you care? In a nice North Fresno neighborhood like this one, the last thing you'd ever really think about is poverty. In fact, it must feel so far away, but studies are now showing that that much poverty there can affect everyone here. For starters, a smaller tax base means less city services like police and fire. And then there is what Dr. Jindian calls brain drain. When there is not enough of an educated workforce, business owners struggle to find good employees, which then limits their economic growth. And when growth stalls, many of the best educated candidates leave the valley, making matters even worse.
I would like to see my children be able to stay in Fresno in the Central Valley. But if we don't produce opportunities, educational and economic opportunities for them, they're going to leave.
These are cabbages growing down this row.
Back downtown in Lowell, Esther Delahaye is showing me which of her crops are hanging in there through the winter. She is the executive director of the Lowell Community Development Corporation. Their community garden sits in the shadow of Highway 180.
I feel that there's just a huge disconnect, kind of a disunity. It's not our city, it's them that live on the south side or the southwest side, or them that live in the north.
Delahaye has lived everywhere, north and south. She moved downtown while studying at Fresno Pacific, and she decided to stick around. She loves this neighborhood, despite some very real problems.
We see in healthy communities that homeownership is around 40 to 50%. In this community, it's below 12%. So we see a gap there.
Blight is a problem. Vacant homes dot each street, as do poorly maintained rental property with owners never to be seen. Blanco will tell you, as will others, that this neighborhood is much better than some of the others in Fresno. Still, this single mother knows that her address alone means the odds are stacked against her family.
Do you worry about your kids?
At times, I do. I worry about the fact that they'll be pushed down to the bottom spectrum because of where they've been raised, what school they go to, what nationality they are.
So coming up in part 2, we're going to be talking about the causes of this divide, maybe a role that the city played in it, and now the role that the city's trying to play and trying to bring that divide back, shrink it.
Yeah.
So we got a lot more stuff to cover. That's coming up tomorrow night. At
Okay.
11:00.
So, I didn't realize this, but Blanca's actually here. So if you want to meet her and talk to her about her story, that would be great. I think, who else was in the video that's here too? Is right there. So with Lowell Community. And there's a 3-part series. It's really good. You should watch your own news. It's really amazing. So I'm going to share a little bit of examples of the businesses that kind of help solve some of these challenges. So Breaking Ground. Breaking Ground started on the west side of Chicago. Jeff Dennis works for the Navigators, and he was sent as kind of a missionary into Chicago, a white guy into a mostly black neighborhood, to address lack of economic opportunity on the west side of the city of Chicago. And it took him a number of years to gain the trust of the community because he's a white dude in a black community. And they're wondering, what's this white guy doing in our community, and what's his motivation? What is he after? What's he trying to figure out? And eventually he joined the local Missionary Baptist Church, the only white guy in the African American church. He earned his keep because he basically sat in the back and just listened and began to just be real and ask crazy questions. And he eventually got invited to be on the elder board for the Missionary Baptist Church after about 6 or 7 years. And he started to talk to the young people in the neighborhood, and they figured out that he was legit and that he had and the church had an authentic desire to really help out the local community. And essentially started a landscaping business with the guys in the neighborhood and trained them on how to use all the landscaping equipment, trained them how to do it in an efficient manner. And then he started a plastic manufacturing, mold manufacturing company. The thing about Jeff is that he didn't take any government money to do this. He basically said, I'm going to find a way to fund this, and I'm going to find investors, and I'm going to find individuals who believe in the vision that I feel like that God's given me, and I'm going to do this without depending on government money. And so he's launched 3 businesses so far. A construction company, so he's building energy-efficient homes on the west side of the city of Chicago, and he's using the guys in the neighborhood and teaching them the trades and teaching them the skills to get them employable work. And I think they've built like 125 homes. And then I think the feds allocated a certain amount of money to each state and the state to each city to do you guys have SSAs here? It's essentially for the chambers of commerce that they can hire a company to keep the streets clean and throw out the trash and that kind of thing. So there's an apportionment of money that goes to each of those SSAs. So Jeff went in and bid on those contracts, and he was able to win like 3 or 4 of those contracts. So now his guys are doing street cleaning, power washing, that kind of thing in 4 SSAs in the Chicagoland area. And those contracts are $125,000, $160,000, $250,000, depending upon the apportionment for each of those places. This is one that I was involved in, King Lizzie Creative. It's essentially a design company that said, we want to work with gang members in our community because we know they have a lot of skills. And some of them are great graffiti artists. You know what I mean, right? How many of your businesses have gotten tagged lately? They used to do some amazing work and at night and really very, very creative. And we said, well, let's not be punitive. Let's do restorative justice. You guys want to exercise your skills? We're going to give you a legitimate opportunity for you to exercise your skills. Come into King Lizzie. We're going to teach you about how to market your skills. And we're going to teach you about different mediums. So we started off with the one guy in the neighborhood that trusted us. And he's also the guy that broke our front window. So we figured out, hey, we know you did it, so why don't you come in and we can talk a little bit about using your skills for a more productive thing. So we started off with one guy. We eventually had about 15 guys that came in, and we were teaching them the design. What we ended up doing is we ended up creating, we took a pair of blank canvas tennis shoes, and we said, we want to do a Derrick Rose with the bull design on one side and the other side. And what we decided to do is that we were going to figure out what size Derrick Rose wears, and we bought the tennis shoes, and then we had the guys design the design, and then we had a couple of them actually hand paint the design, the face of Derrick Rose with the Bulls uniform on the other side. And then the next step is that we were going to go to a Bulls game, and we were going to donate them to Derrick Rose, that he can auction them off, and then part of the money that he raises as he auctions them off comes back to King Lizzie to fund some of the additional work, right? So Yeah, and so we're like 3/4 of the way in the process, and so we're figuring out how to make the connection with Derek, so it's a work in progress right now. But that was an idea that the kids came up with. They're smart. They know how business operates. They've got street smarts. They understand how the market works, and we're missing those skills. So there's plenty of opportunity there. There's a number of other things that we're doing at King Lizzie, but I'll talk about that in the workshop. And then Central Detroit CDC, Lisa Johannan, and all these, let me show, I can launch this picture here. Let me see. There we go. So they have started 9 businesses in the last 7 years. And this is a Christian woman. She went to the most impoverished part of Detroit, barren area, houses dilapidated, and she had a vision to say, I really want to see economic opportunity being provided for the local community. So they started a fishery, they started an organic grocery store, they started an edible foods, edible vegetables, the same thing that's edible flowers, and there's another company around here that's doing the same kind of thing. They started an aquaponics business, they started a housing redevelopment business, all with local residents. And it's all local resident led. They started a local restaurant. Now they're going to be transitioning that restaurant and giving it back to the owners because they don't feel like it's a viable model. There's not enough customers in the area. So some of the businesses that folks have launched have failed. And I'll talk a little bit about failure as a lesson opportunity, a learning opportunity from when I'm in the workshop. And then there's a few more that I would share, but I'm running out of time, so I'm going to just finish off by, I was going to show you, where is it? There it is. Oh, yeah, there it is. I'll start this off. This is Muhammad Yunus. How many of you know the name Muhammad Yunus? Okay, he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2009 for the Grameen Bank. And basically, he's a guy who started a micro-loan program in Bangladesh. His idea is, I want to see a poverty museum in my country by the next 10 years, so that no one's poor in my country. And he was a banker, and he basically came out one day and he saw all these squatters, and they didn't have any money. They were living right there on the street. And basically started to have conversations with them, and he asked them, how much money do you need to do something? He said, about $10. $5 to start a business. And it just blew his mind that that's all the amount of money that they needed to do things. And so he started to loan his own money to the folks that were there. Eventually grew it to where he launched Grameen Bank, and now Grameen Bank is launched in New York. It's now it has an American presence, and most of the folks that borrow money from Grameen Bank in the United States are women who are single, and they're starting their own businesses. And so it's a great model.